welcome to Kimbo's Variety Show, where I do a variety of arts and crafts to show you how to cultivate a creative life. Now, it is early December, and we are thinking about Christmas. Christmas is on the brains, okay? So one of my coworkers was talking about how all the Etsy watercolor commissions were like AI. And I was like, well, I could do that for you. So she wants a house portrait painted for a family member, and I thought I would take you through the process of creating a watercolor portrait for somebody. Not a face portrait, a house portrait. Watercolor is one of my favorite mediums. It's very tricky. A lot of people don't like it because it's so, it's like a little it's flowy, it's uncontrollable at times, but we love a challenge over here. So I'm going to use a special trick to make it go faster. Now, I totally went through art school, and I feel like one of my specialties is drawing, and I could totally freehand this if I wanted to, but it takes a lot of extra brain power. So the little trick we're going to use is the projector method. So I've already put the pictures on a USB drive, and we're going to project them, and then we're going to trace it. Even doing this, though, is a special skill of itself because you have to get everything lined up right, you have to make sure it doesn't move, and then you have to trace it right. And then you have to modify it a little bit even after you've copied it. But this just allows us to get the image on the paper fairly accurately, fairly quickly, because time is money. So before we get started, let's look at some of the supplies that I like to use. First, here we have my favorite thing ever that I got when I was in college. And our college was a small school, but we had an amazing bookstore with amazing art supplies. So this is the one I got then, and still going strong. Winsor Newton Travel Watercolor Set. And so it opens up, and it's got these little wings that fold out where you can mix colors, and all of these are nice, very pigmented Winsor Newton watercolor patties. And then I've supplemented it with some of my favorite tube colors, like when I'm just working, I'll just put those back. When I'm working on my own, I'll put a little bit of purple over here, a little bit of green, and if you are using it in the travel way, you can put water in this guy and pour it in here, and then all of a sudden you have like a cool little travel set. So neat. I also have a bunch of tube watercolors. Cotman, of course. Winsor Newton and Cotman are my favorite brands for those things. I have a whole bunch of fancy watercolor brushes. Spend good money on brushes. It really matters. A good brush will hold its shape after much use. And then last but not least is a good watercolor block of paper. The reason you want to use what's called a watercolor block, what makes it a block is that the pages are not free floating. So they're all kind of stuck together with this special glue. And what that does is keep the paper from folding and flexing while you're painting it, because water causes the paper to wave up. But this keeps the paper nice and flat, and it will allow you to use as much water as you need. Then at the end, once it's all dry, it'll dry back flat, and then you can peel the paper off of the block with a palette knife. And then also, I love watercolor pencils. Sometimes you just need to create texture in a different way. And so I have all of these Derwent watercolor pencils that are phenomenal. Excellent pigment, excellent color, and they do last quite a while. So the first thing we gotta do is set up the projector so that we can sketch our paper. Alright, so now we are going to start doing the real work. So I have everything set up here, and as you're working, one thing that's very important is to make sure you keep your paper clean, because you want to keep it clean, because with a lot of these watercolors we don't end up painting the entire paper, so you don't want any little dirty smudges. So what's important is any tools that you use, or your hands especially, must be clean so you don't smudge any dirt. And another thing, I used artist tape, which usually does a great job, but over here it tore off just a teeny tiny bit when I pulled it off, and so we're just going to snip off that edge, it does not really affect the composition. Got a nice ceramic color mixing dish, paint mixing dish over here. I actually made that myself. And when you're doing watercolor, you always want to have two things of water. Okay, one that's going to get really dirty for mixing, for like rinsing colors, and one for like when you just need to add water to your brush. And this is like the clean water dish, and it's just when you need to add clean water. Because if you are trying to use like a gray, and if you dipped it in dirty water, it might taint the color that you're using. So having the clean water will help dilute that color without making it dirty. And then we have the tools over here. So here we go. I'm so nervous. Now I've used this tape, and it's just artist tape, so it should come up fairly easily to mask off these straight edges to make it easier to get the color in faster. And there's another mask called Misket, but I've not always had the best luck with that, so. Okay, so the roof is complete, and now I'm going to work on some of these colors in the white, because white is never, well, rarely ever is it truly just white. There's always some shadows, some reflections, so we're going to try and capture some of this haloing around the lights and in the windows. So for the current progress update, we are working on refining some of these lines, and I'm going to focus on this area because it's going to be a little tricky, because photos are often, you know, when you zoom in you get all this grainy business, and makes it a little tricky, but also it kind of also makes it a little easier in a way because you're not focusing on all the fine details. We're focusing on basically blobs of color. Because if you're able to capture these blobs of color accurately, then it's going to look the same. The eye is going to read it as the same kind of thing. Now, I talked about this a little bit, but with the windows, I went ahead and painted the coloring. Like in this window, I've got some darker areas in there. And so I've painted it like I've seen it. And then for these tiny little window boxes, we're going to go back over it with the gouache. So here's a test of that. Because I tried drawing all the little boxes and that was a pain, so we're gonna do a little trick, a little trickery. Alright, I'm pretty much done with the house. You can see the picture, compare picture to painting. Yeah, pretty much done with the house. The only thing I have left to do on the house is just the windowsill, the window lines, these pesky things, and then just the greenery around the outside. So I'm kind of going through and putting some of the dark areas, and then gonna layer from dark to light on that one. I love this little tree. I imagine that it's some type of Japanese maple, so I tried to capture the way that it, being familiar with the tree, the way that it flows, so hopefully I did that. But yeah, after we get the greenery in the windowsills, it will be mostly done. So right now we're using the big brush. I love an excuse to use the big brush, because normally I work on a very small scale. like miniatures and stuff. But it's really nice just to be able to lay down a thick stroke of color. Okay, well, finally finished with this project. Have it all packaged up nicely for my client, and I'm pretty pleased with how it all turned out. I think it's definitely more painterly than I have been in the past. In the past, I feel like with some of my watercolor things I've done, I've been really focused on like accuracy and like realistic. But I feel like for this one, I was like, you know, I can't do that to myself with all these straight lines. Like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to like make everything so precise. Plus, that's like the beauty and the character of watercolors, like letting it flow, letting it be what it is, letting it, you know, be free and washy and pretty and artistic. I mean, if they wanted a photo of it, they would have taken a photo and put a photo up if they wanted a painting. And so definitely more painterly than I've been in the past, but overall super pleased. Have to say, white houses are not gonna be my favorite thing to paint because white is never white. White reflects light, and you know, so it's all about these little illusions. And like when you're working on things in the middle, everyone gets to that point where you're like, oh my god, this looks terrible, what's happening? Are these colors, they're so weird, everything's weird. But that's when you have to keep cooking because everything always looks weird in the middle, man. The middle's a weird place, so you gotta push through till the end so you get a finished product. And I always like to wrap them up in these nice plastic sheet protectors. I have a whole bunch of these that I use anytime I'm making art for somebody to give to them. Just like really protects it, especially after you've worked so hard to keep the whites white. And then I signed my little signature. I normally do my full name, Kimberly Kinsland, on here, but this time I just did Kate Kinsland and a little date. So super pleased with it, and thanks for watching another episode of Kimbo's Variety Show. See you later for whatever we come up with next.